شهریان افغانستان یگانه شبکه تلویزیونی ملی افغانها در خارج از کشور.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to the Caravan of Truth. Today, in the Caravan of Truth program, we will be explaining two specific topics regarding Afghanistan. In the first topic, we will explain that ceasefire and peace under occupation are against the Afghan culture and will never happen until the complete withdrawal of the U.S. NATO troops from Afghanistan. In the second topic, we will explain that nobody could guarantee a stable and terrorism-free Afghanistan in the presence of the terrorism-sponsored and apartheid-like Sittami regime in Kabul. In the meantime, we will explain the difference and similarity between the apartheid regime of South Africa and the present apartheid-like Sittami regime in Afghanistan. Now, in the first topic, we will explain that ceasefire and peace under occupation are against the Afghan culture and will not happen until the complete agreeable withdrawal of the foreign troops from the country. For clarification, first we briefly explain some fundamental facts about the Afghan culture. Understanding of Afghanistan culture is important for all foreigners in dealing with Afghanistan people for the reason that knowledge and insight about the Afghan culture prevent terrible mistakes and human suffering in Afghanistan. Culture is different than law. Culture is the language, religion, tradition, customs, and the way of thinking of a particular nation and people, which is the matter of centuries and millenniums. But law is made and enforced by government and changeable anytime. So culture is more stronger than law for the reason that culture is obeyed by the people voluntarily, but law is enforced. People are afraid of the law from police in the follow the law. But culture is voluntarily followed by the law, and this is the difference. Afghan people have an old and rich culture, like we said in last program too. These things. It is necessary for the Afghanistan occupiers to know some basic facts about Afghan culture for the reason that the Western imperialism had made terrible mistakes in Afghanistan in the past 18 years, which resulted in humiliating defeat for the invaders. If the U.S. had knowledge and respected the Afghan culture in history 18 years ago, it would have prevented the tremendous economic and human losses in Afghanistan, which resulted in fatality. So it is necessary for the U.S. government and Western imperialism to know at least the four basic pillars of Afghan culture in order to avoid further suffering and losses in Afghanistan. For clarification, Afghanistan culture has four basic pillars. The four basic pillars of Afghanistan culture are hospitality, freedom, equality, and retaliation. The first pillar of Afghan culture is hospitality, what means that Afghanistan people are friendly and generously receptive of all guests, visitors, and foreigners. The second fundamental pillar of Afghan culture is freedom and independence. What means that Afghan culture is not submissive to foreign invasions. This is the reason that Afghanistan is historically and momentarily the graveyard of foreign empires. The third fundamental pillar of Afghan culture is equality. Equality means that all Afghans are equal in dignity and respect. Afghanistan culture rejects discrimination and different treatment. Retaliation means that any intentional harm and damages are unacceptable in Afghan culture. What means that intentional harm and damages provoke retaliation and similar reaction. And this is the reason that war and bloodshed does not solve any problem in Afghanistan, but increase violence and retaliations. And this is the reason that in the past 18 years, the killing and wounding of over 1 million Afghanistan people by the U.S. NATO forces and the Kabul apartheid-like puppet regime have not resolved any problem in Afghanistan, but exponentially increase retaliation, violence, and bloodshed in the country to the point that today Afghanistan is the most safe and dangerous country in the entire world. So basically, Afghan culture is peaceful and Afghanistan people are harmless and safe for the reason that there is consequences for any intentional harm and damage in Afghans' culture. As a reality, Afghan people have noble culture which has higher value and standard for the reason that naturally Afghan culture is the basis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For instance, the basic principle of Afghan culture like freedom, equality, hospitality, friendship, respect to other rights, and no discrimination are also the fundamental principle of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Basically, the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 was against all the four basic pillars of Afghan culture. This was the reason that the U.S. invasion has failed in its entirety despite spending trillions of dollars and the tremendous human suffering in the past 18 years in Afghanistan. Based on credible report, Afghanistan, the United States spent $4.5 trillion in Afghanistan and $4.5 trillion in Iraq war. But now they say close to 1 trillion they lost. But that is 4.5 trillion the US lost in Afghanistan war in the past 18 years. What means that freedom is this was the reason that the U.S. invasion has failed in its entirety, despite spending trillions of dollars and the tremendous human suffering in Afghanistan in the past 18 years. What means that freedom is the fundamental pillar of Afghan culture, but the U.S. invasion was against the freedom of Afghanistan people. Afghan culture is hospitable, but hospitality does not mean invasions, disrespectful behavior, and trespassing by guests, visitors, and foreigners. Afghan culture is based on equality and does not accept discrimination and different treatment. But contrary to the Afghan culture, after the occupation in 2001, the U.S. imposed apartheid-like minority warlord regime of the Northern Alliance in Kabul and sideline the major Pashtun ethnicity in the Kabul government, which make over 65% of Afghanistan population. Northern Alliance, we will the warlordism. I do not mean the Nubal, Tajik, Hazara, Uzbek, and other minority Afghan brothers. The imposition of apartheid-like minority warlord regime in Kabul was a terrible mistake and discrimination against the major Pashtun ethnicity in the past 18 years. The fourth pillar of Afghan culture is retaliation. Retaliation means, like we said, that any intentional harm and damages provoke reaction, retaliation, and similar response. In fact, Afghanistan is the home of all people, of all Afghan people, which has been occupied by the U.S. invasion since 2001. Therefore, any ceasefire in peace under occupation means revolt and submission to the enemy in the Afghan retaliatory culture. So the U.S. NATO invader should not dream about ceasefire in peace under occupation in Afghanistan, but expect retaliation from the Afghanistan people. On the ground, right, ceasefire and peace under occupation means gift and submission to the enemy, which is 100% prohibited and unacceptable in the retaliatory Afghan culture. So briefly, the U.S. invasion of 2001 was against all the four basic pillars of Afghan culture. This was the reason that the U.S. invasion has failed in its entirety despite spending hundreds of billions of dollars and the tremendous human suffering in the past 18 years. Based on the foregoing cultural facts, the U.S. and NATO should not dream of any ceasefire or peace under occupation in Afghanistan. But just like the former Soviet Union invasion in 1980s, the ongoing Afghan-American war will go on as long as Afghanistan is occupied. If the U.S. wants ceasefire and peace in Afghanistan, then the absolute condition for ceasefire in peace in Afghanistan is the complete, agreeable withdrawal of the U.S. NATO troops and ending the occupation of Afghanistan. Furthermore, the U.S. government should be advised to realize the fact that the ongoing 18-year resistance in Afghanistan means that the Afghan people are fully determined to liberate their country from the ongoing American invasion supported by the Western imperialism. Today, it is a reality that the paper tiger U.S. NATO generals are on the run in Afghanistan and could not fight directly against the Afghan resistance in the battlefield, but hiding in their military bases in Afghanistan. This is the reason that the U.S. NATO now abuse the poor Afghan people as human shield to continue the occupation of the mineral-rich Afghanistan. In other words, the paper tiger U.S. NATO generals have been hiding in their military bases and lost morale to fight face-to-face in the battlefield against the Afghan resistance. Therefore, the invaders in the Kabul puppet regime have been hiring poor Afghan people to fight for the occupation of Afghanistan. Abusing of poor Afghan people as human shield is crime against humanity. In fact, hundreds of poor Afghan police and soldiers are being killed each week in Afghanistan. Today, Afghanistan has around 1 million widows and around 3 million orphan children. Majority of these widow and orphan children are the result of those poor Afghans in the security forces, military, and intelligence spy agency who had been hired by the occupier for a few $100s in a month and had been killed in the ongoing war in Afghanistan. So the number of widow and orphan are increasing exponentially in Afghanistan. As a common sense the US NATO leaders and the Kabul warlord regime have the option to either fight face to face against the Afghan resistance or end the occupation. But it is crime against humanity to abuse and hire poor Afghan people for war as human shield. These people who are fighting in Afghanistan, these police soldiers, they do not like occupation. They are Afghans. They follow the same culture. We are all Afghan. We have the same culture. But they do not have option. They have children, they have family, and they have to work to feed their families. And this is the reason. Furthermore, and those people now in Afghanistan, people are 80% or 70% jobless. They have no choice. This is the reason they know their death, but they have no other option. But this is the only way to feed their children. Furthermore, the paper tiger, US NATO imperialism should be advised not to beg for ceasefire under occupation anymore. On the ground that there is no ceasefire, as we said before, there is no ceasefire in peace with the enemy during invasion in the Afghanistan retaliatory culture. Therefore, the war for independence will continue as long as Afghanistan is occupied by the US NATO troops. In conclusion, the US government should acknowledge the reality of the 18 years invasion of Afghanistan that the US imposed. Kabul apartheid-like regime is dysfunctional. The American imported constitution is impractical, which resulted in lawlessness and chaos in the country. And the 18 years American invasion of Afghanistan has failed and will never succeed. Therefore, it will be a wise decision for the US government and its NATO allies to withdraw its troops as soon as possible to save further human suffering and military expenses in the unwinnable war in Afghanistan and prevent another Vietnam-like operation frequent in the Afghan homeland. But as a common sense, the US and the imperialist West should respect the right of Afghanistan people to determine their own future, to make a new national government, a new constitution based on Afghan culture, religion, tradition, and history like they did before. So now, let us hear one beautiful song of Gulpana, Pashto song, and then we will continue. Gulpana. Okay, wale panash veta zumadistarko. Good sank. So now, in the second topic, we will explain that nobody could guarantee a terrorism-free and stable Afghanistan after the U.S. NATO troops withdrawal in the presence of the current terrorism-sponsored and apartheid-like minority warlord regime in Kabul. For clarification, the U.S. demands for a terrorism-free and stable Afghanistan in exchange for ending the occupation is contrary. Occupation is contrary on the ground that, contradictory on the ground that, on one hand, the U.S. government is trying to salvage the Kabul dysfunctional regime after the withdrawal of the foreign troops from Afghanistan. On the other hand, the U.S. demands a terrorism-free and stable Afghanistan after the U.S. NATO troops withdrawal. Nobody could guarantee a terrorism-free and stable Afghanistan in the presence of the Kabul dysfunctional Sittami warlord regime. What means that the Kabul regime itself is a terrorism-sponsored entity which has been creating, funding, and training terrorism and ISIS for years in Afghanistan to destabilize the neighboring countries of Afghanistan. Therefore, in the presence of the Kabul warlord regime, nobody could guarantee a terrorism-free Afghanistan. Furthermore, the U.S.-imposed Kabul regime is absolutely apartheid-like regime, which is composed almost exclusively from the Northern Alliance minority warlords in their gangs in the past 18 years. The major Pashtun ethnicity, which make over 65% of Afghanistan population, is obviously sidelined in the Kabul government in the past 18 years. Therefore, the Kabul minority warlord regime will never be able to rule Afghanistan people and restore peace and stability after the withdrawal of the occupying forces from the country. Therefore, the U.S. demands for a stable and terrorism-free Afghanistan in the presence of the apartheid-like minority warlord regime are contradictory with reality on the ground. If the U.S. demands a stable and terrorism-free Afghanistan, then it will be the matter of necessity to get rid of the terrorism-sponsored and apartheid-like minority warlord regime, which is cancer to peace and stability since ending the Soviet war in the 1980s until the present time in the past 30 years. Can you remember this people? This is not now. This anti-Pashtun coalition of the Tajik, Uzbek, and Hazara warlords started from 1992 when there was a coalition of these anti-Pashtun warlords and overthrew Dr. Najib. Only Najib government, just Najib, he ran away from the Ark and was was in the United Nations headquarters in Kabul. Then the Gilam Jam militia and the Setami Parcham generals in the military in the Kabul puppet regime at that time just invited Ahmad Shah Massoud to enter Kabul. That was a plot. The Mujahideen did not overthrow Najib regime. That was a coup. A Setami coup means anti-Pashtun coup against against Najib. When Najib ran to the United Nations compound, but Babra Karmal was free and was going to Russia and coming back, and he was walking freely in Mazar-e-Sharif. And the reason was that, Babra Karmal was a Tajik communist, but Dr. Najib was a Pashtun communist. And this was the only difference. So these people are Sikh people. They are obviously extremely racist, prejudiced. And Babra Karmal was walking freely in Mazar, and there was no restriction under the protection of Gilam Jam militia. But Dr. Najib, he was like in prison in the headquarters of the United Nations, and he did not allow him even to fly from Kabul to New Delhi. If he did fly at that time, he would not have been executed, but they did not allow him to go to Delhi, to India. And when the Taliban reached to the outskirts of Kabul and to the gates of Kabul at that time, Masood was telling to Dr. Najib, hey, biya ke Taliban, madam, please come, that Taliban is coming. At that time, he refused. Dr. Najib refused that, no, I would not go with you. And this was the reason when they came, he was executed. So just we are telling the history, and this is not prejudice, this is not prejudice thing. Just we want to clear the facts, because to solve our problem, this is this 30 years problem. So the present Kabul regime is basically an apartheid-like or Setami regime. Apartheid-like means Setami regime, which is made of the Northern Alliance minority warlords. All Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara, noble Afghans, they are not warlords. They are very friendly with Pashtun. We are all one Afghans. I'm specifically talking about this Northern Alliance warlords gang. And now, please, you hear me what I'm talking about. For better understandings of the issue, it is necessary to define Setami and Setamism in Afghanistan. Setami means those warlords and politicians in Afghanistan who believe on Setamism. Setamism is an ideology which is based on the division of Afghanistan and hostility toward the major Pashtun ethnicity in their language and culture. That means Setami and Setamism. They are separatists, they want to divide Afghanistan, and second, they are hostile toward the major Afghan or Pashtun ethnicity. The present US-imposed Kabul regime is apartheid-like or Setami regime, which is almost exclusively made of the Northern Alliance warlords. For clarification, when the US occupied Afghanistan in 2001, then Washington sidelined the major Pashtun ethnicity in the Kabul government. The US government imposed Hamid Karzai regime in Kabul, which was over 95% made from the Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara minority warlords who were hostile toward the major Pashtun ethnicity in their culture and language. What means that the US imposed apartheid-like regime like in South Africa and Afghanistan after the invasion in 2001. The only difference between the South Africa apartheid regime in the Kabul Setami regime is the fact that in South Africa, the discrimination was on the ground of racism, skin, black and white. But in Kabul, apartheid-like regime, the discrimination is based on ethnicity. This is the only difference. What means that in South Africa, apartheid regime is small, English, Dutch, white minority, white European of 7 to 8% had been ruling the over 90% majority native black people. But in the Kabul Setami regime, over 90% of the Kabul regime, security forces, military, foreign ministry, embassies, and government institutions have been ruled by the minority Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara warlords and their gangs in the past 18 years U.S. occupation. But the major Pashtun ethnicity does not have a 110% present in the central institution of Kabul regime. Therefore, the Kabul minority regime is apartheid-like regime of minority which will never be able to rule the majority Afghan people after the US NATO troops withdrawal. The present Kabul regime is apartheid-like for the reason that over 90% of the Kabul regime is made of Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara, Setami organizations, including the Jamiyat Setami Anti-Pashtun Party of Burhanuddin Rabbani, the Nizar Anti-Pashtun Gang of Ahmad Shah Massoud, the pro-Soviet Ghilam Jam militia, and the women-abused Mazari Gang of Hazara, Afghan. Today, these anti-Pashtun warlords control over 90% of the Kabul regime institution and combined. Historically, when the Soviet occupation ended, the above-mentioned minority anti-Pashtun network had made an anti-Pashtun coalition and overthrew Dr. Najib in 1992. Which resulted in the creation of Rabbani Massoud regime in Kabul in the early 1990s. Just like we said before, that there was a coup. They made a coup that was an anti-Pashtun coup by the Northern Alliance minority, who were inside the Babra Karmal regime in Kabul and who were outside in the north of Kabul, like Jamiyat and Nizar. The Rabbani Massoud Sistani regime was too weak and unable to rule even a single city of Kabul at that time after the coup, when Ahmad Shah Massoud entered the ark. As a result of the incompetent Rabbani Massoud anti-Pashtun regime, Afghanistan fell in chaos. In Afghanistan history, that chaos and anarchy of Rabbani Massoud regime is called the era of warlordism, which began in early 1990s and ended in 1996. During the era of warlordism, Afghanistan was practically divided into North and South by the Northern Alliance minority warlords. The era of warlordism ended in 1996 when the Taliban defeated the Northern Alliance warlords and restored stability and reunited the divided Afghanistan. After the defeat, majority of the Northern Alliance warlords were hiding in caves and mountains in the north of Afghanistan. These are all truth. When the US invaded Afghanistan in 2001, these are the facts. Do not hear the Kabul minority warlord regime who are now inside their offices hiding, and they could not go outside. Even the American taxpayer money hire bodyguards just to protect them. And now they are inside, but they were bluffing that, oh, we overthrew the Taliban. They were defeated more than 10 times, this Massoud, these people, these warlords, by the Taliban. And this is true. This is truth. So the era of warlordism ended in 1996 when the Taliban defeated the Northern Alliance warlord, restored stability, and reunited Afghanistan. After the defeat, majority of the Northern Alliance warlords were hiding in caves and mountains in the north of Afghanistan. When the US invaded Afghanistan in 2001, then the US had made Hamid Karzai regime in Kabul from those Northern Alliance warlords who were dividing Afghanistan before and then were defeated by the Taliban, who were prejudiced against the major Pashtun ethnicity. Although there are around 5 to 8% Pashtun Afghan in the Kabul regime, but those are symbolic for the reason that those Pashtun warlords and politicians, including Hamid Karzai and Ghani, have been working for the US occupation and settlemism in Afghanistan. This Kabul regime, regardless who they are, Pashtun, non-Pashtun, all are working for two. One is for the American occupation, and second for Setamism, for these anti-Pashtun warlords. Warlords. If they do not do, then they would be fired. When Hakim Taniwal was my friend, and he was governor of Khust province. One time I went, long time ago, I went to Khust, and he invited me to his home. And at the night, he told me the story. I asked, he told me that how he became governor. He said that Karzai asked for him, the Northern Alliance warlords, the mafia leader, boss. He asked him that I would like to appoint Hakim Taniwal as governor of Khust. And he refused at the beginning. He said, no, he is Pashtun, he is from Khust, and he is Tanai. Tanai is a tribe, so he could not be a governor. And after that, I don't know what happened. Then he became the governor of Khust. So this is the reason. They were all, everybody who were working in the Setami regime in the past 20 years, all Pashtun, they are working for Setamism. Otherwise, they would be fired. Like Merajuddin Pathan, he was also my friend. He was the governor of Khust later. And when I heard that Merajuddin Pathan became governor in Afghanistan, and I really, at that time, believe me, I thought he could not continue and he would be fired soon. And exactly it happened. After a while from Khust, he was transferred to Ghazni. And in Ghazni, I think some Korean girls were kidnapped and he was fired. And that was only to justify his firing. And the reason for that was he was not Setami. And this was the reason. I thought that he would be fired and could not continue in this Setami warlords apartheid-like regime. So anyone, Ghani, this, what they call, all the Sayaf, or this, what they call, he is Northern Alliance warlord, this Sayaf, before the Osama bin Laden, this Wahhabism, he was with him before. But when they ran away from Kabul, then he was in Afghanistan, on that side, under the Taliban control. So Ghani, this Hashishman, Hamid Karzai, all these are worse than Setami. They are against Pashtun, they are against the Afghan, the Pashto language, the Afghan culture, the same way like the Northern Alliance warlords. But they are worse than the Northern Alliance warlords, because these Pashtun are hypocrites. These are worse. These are worse than the Northern Alliance, because Northern Alliance, everybody knew that you are anti-Pashtun. But these Pashtun, Setami gangs, they are worse, because they purport they are Pashtun, but they are working for the Setamism. So anyway, these 5 to 8% Pashtun in the Kabul Setami regime in the past 18 years, all they are working for Setimism. So now, let us hear one Arabic song, and after that we will continue. Arabic song? So, this history, this talking, this has nothing to do. I love Afghanistan people, not only Afghanistan people, all people of the entire world. In my mind, there is not, I know myself, I do not have even 1% to be prejudiced or hostile to people, People are people everywhere. If some person is against people, he is against God. If you are against people, you are against God. So this is the reason. But I am talking about this warlordism, these warlords in Afghanistan who are cancer to peace, and all Afghanistan people, including Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara, and other minorities, are the victim of this warlordism and their gangs. These are not only Pashtun, all Afghanistan people. So this is the reason. Let us talk to know how is the solution and what is the solution. So briefly, the current U.S. imposed Kabul regime is apartheid-like regime based on the following 7 reasons. 1, over 90% of the Kabul regime officials are non-Pashtun minority warlords and politicians. 2, over 90% of Kabul regime official language is Persian language, which is the minority language in Afghanistan. 3, there is less than 10% Pashto or Afghani language in the Kabul regime, which is the language of the major Pashtun ethnicity, which make over 65% of Afghanistan population. Population-wise, the Pashtun make over 65%, and their language is Pashto. But in the Kabul regime, the Pashto is less than 10%. So we are talking about the apartheid and apartheid-like. This is the reason that the present Setami or minority warlords regime is apartheid-like regime, or Setami regime. Setami or apartheid-like in English. 4, the ruling minority warlords of the Kabul regime even oppose the name of Afghan in national ID card for the reason that literally Afghan means Pashtun and Afghanistan means the country of Pashtun. These big people, you hear that from the news that they oppose the name of Afghan in the national ID card. 5, the U.S. imposed constitution is prejudiced and discriminate against the major Pashtun ethnicity for the reason that in the entire world, the number of members in the parliament depends on the population of the state or province. But in Afghanistan apartheid-like constitution, the member of parliament are based on the number of districts, not the number of people. This is the reason that the major Pashtun ethnicity who make over 65% of Afghanistan population are minority in Afghanistan parliament, because they just increase their what they call like Panjshir. Before was 1 district, now they turn to province, and now there are I think 6-7 districts there, just to increase their member in the parliament. On the contrary, so this is the reason that the major Pashtun ethnicity who make over 65% of Afghanistan population are minority in Afghanistan parliament. But on the contrary, the Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara minority warlords who make around 10 and 8% of Afghanistan population are majority in the Afghanistan population, in the Afghanistan parliament. 6, even in America, here they say the representative or congressman or congresswoman that like parliamentarian. Here is also based on people. California, which has around 39 or 40 million people, they have 53 representative are in Wallasijarga like in parliament. But Montana, like South Dakota, North Dakota, Alaska, Wyoming, these have only one representative are congressmen in the in the House, for the reason that their number is, the population in these states are almost less than 1 million, around 1 million or less. So this is the reason they have one representative, but California is also a state. They have 53 representatives in the Congress, in the House, for the reason that they have more population, 53 million population. Yeah. But in Afghanistan, that is not population-wise, not on the people. That is based on the districts. Yeah. Okay. So, 6, the U.S. apartheid-like imposed constitution in Afghanistan is prejudice against the Afghanistan true history. For instance, Afghanistan history is full of national heroes in the past 300 years, like Mirwais Khan, who defeated the Persian Safavid army and made an independent Afghan government in Kandahar in 1709. Shah Mahmud Hutaki, who overthrew the Safavid Empire in Persia and was ruling the present Iran from 1722 to 1725. Ahmad Shah Baba or Ahmad Shah Durrani, the founder of the present Afghanistan in 1747. Wazir Muhammad Akbar Khan, the hero of the first Anglo-Afghan war. Malalai and Ayub Khan, the hero of the second Anglo-Afghan war. Al-Azrat Amanullah Khan, the hero of Afghanistan independence from British colonialism in 1919. He was the only hero who got independent from the British colonialism. At that time, he was the first one who got independent from the British colonialism. At that time, 1/4 of the world was under the British control. And President Dawood Khan, who was the most patriotic and transparent leader in Afghanistan history. All these above mentioned are the undisputed true heroes in the Afghanistan's 300 years history. But the U.S. imposed prejudiced Setamir constitution turned blind eye on all these undisputable historic heroes of Afghanistan, and just has recognized Ahmad Shah Massoud as a national hero. In fact, Ahmad Shah Massoud was not a hero. We all of us knew that. He was an anti-Pashtun separatist warlord who was dividing Afghanistan, and later had been involved in severe human rights abuses and mega crime in Afghanistan. So the present U.S. imposed apartheid-like constitution of Afghanistan is insult to the Afghanistan true history. 7, the Kabul regime intelligence or spy agency is historically basically anti-Pashtun agency, which has been involved not only in the creation of terrorism and drug smuggling in Afghanistan, but also torturing and executing only Pashtun Afghan in the past 18 years. The Kabul spy agency was established by CIA and the Israeli Mossad after the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. The Kabul intelligence agency had tortured and executed tens of thousands innocent Pashtun Afghan in the past 18 years under terrorism, under the slogan of terrorism. This is the reason that it is the most hated institution in Afghanistan. I mean, the Kabul spy agency is the most hated institution in Afghanistan. The Kabul regime intelligence agency is just like the SAWAK intelligence agency in Iran. SAWAK spy agency of Iran was also established by the U.S. puppet Mohammad Raza Shah with the help of the CIA and the Israeli Mossad. SAWAK was dissolved by the Islamic Iranian Revolution in 1979. SAWAK had tortured and executed tens of thousands opponents of the Pahlavi regime. So based on these 7 facts, the Kabul regime is apartheid-like regime. For the foregoing, nobody could guarantee and stable nobody could guarantee a stable and terrorism-free Afghanistan in the presence of the terrorism-sponsored and apartheid-like minority Setami regime in Kabul. In reality, Kabul government is not the monopoly of the abusive warlords and their gangs forever. Intra-Afghan dialogue is the right of all Afghanistan people to be engaged to make a stable, peaceful, and terrorism-free Afghanistan. But the era of apartheid-like regime and Satanism should be over once and for all. Furthermore, the US-funded corrupt election under the occupation did not change, has not changed anything on the ground in the past 18 years. In the past 18 years, but just recycling the same apartheid-like puppet regime of Kabul for continuation of the foreign occupation. So election is the right of Afghanistan people, but election should be in free Afghanistan and Afghan funded. So in conclusion, Afghan means Pashtun. And Afghanistan means the country of Pashtun. Just like Tajikistan means the country of Tajik people, Uzbekistan means the country of Uzbek people, and Mongolistan means the country of Mongolian people. Therefore, an apartheid-like minority regime in the country of Pashtun people is not only unacceptable, but also inhuman. Afghan culture is based on equality. There is no place for discrimination in apartheid-like regime in Afghanistan. For a stable and terrorism-free Afghanistan, the present apartheid-like minority warlord regime must be removed and replaced by a new independent national government in which all Afghans' ethnic brothers have fair representation based on their percentage in the country population. In other words, all the institutions of the next new government should be composed of over 65% Pashtun Afghans, 14% Tajik Afghans, 10% Hazara Afghans, and 8% Uzbek and other minority Afghan brothers, based on their percentage in Afghanistan's population. All Afghans are equal in dignity and respect. There is no discrimination and different treatment in Afghan culture. The US imposed apartheid-like regime and the prejudiced Setami constitution have failed in its entirety in Afghanistan in the past 18 years. Therefore, Afghanistan people need a new government, a new constitution based on Afghan culture, religion, tradition, and history. The US NATO and the pro-Western UNAMA could not impose the apartheid-like minority warlord regime anymore in Afghanistan under the slogan of minority rights. The US NATO and the pro-Western UNAMA could not impose the prejudiced constitution anymore in Afghanistan under the slogan of the rule of law. The US NATO and the pro-Western UNAMA could not impose the US-funded fabricated election anymore in Afghanistan for recycling the puppet warlord regime under the slogan of democracy. The US NATO and the pro-Western UNAMA could not impose falsehood and any anti-Islamic propaganda in Afghanistan anymore under the slogan of freedom of speech. The US and the Western imperialism could not impose the CIA Mossad created SAWAK-like intelligence agency in Afghanistan, on Afghanistan people anymore, which has been torturing and executing only Pashtun Afghan under the slogan of terrorism in the last 18 years. And the US NATO could not impose contradictory demands of a stable and terrorism-free Afghanistan in the presence of the terrorism-sponsored and apartheid-like regime in exchange for ending the occupation. The US NATO and UNAMA should stop any further intervention in Afghanistan. The pain and destruction of 18 years occupation is enough. Thank you very much for hearing. Inshallah, I see you after 1 month, and my time is over. And you have a great month. Salam alaikum.